It sometimes happens to me that I'll walk through a museum and I will see a picture that I've not seen before, and it just arrests me, and I just have to stand in front of it and look at it. And usually I don't understand it at first. It's part of the experience to be arrested by something that you don't understand. And I remember the last time that happened, it was in the National Gallery in London, and it was a picture by Cézanne of an old woman clutching a rosary. And I stood in front of the image, and I gradually came to realize that it could be read as an annunciation of sorts. The light on her forehead, the prayerful posture, it reminded me so much of Mary in those images of the Annunciation. This woman was clearly close to death. She was clearly weighed down, but there was this interiority in her, almost bearing in herself the death of Christ as something to be born in her. Opening ourselves to art is to hear a summons. By giving us images that are incomplete within their own dimensions, whose elements are only hinted at or clash with each other. We're confronted not by a fully fleshed out world, but by one that invites us to fill out or make sense of it. This sense-making is never final or stable. There are always more or other things to see, or different connections to make. Art reveals a power that we often hide from ourselves. The ability to make and understand metaphors that reveal the connectedness of the world. That the world has a depth structure of meaning and connection through which we make and live our lives. We can never see things fully as they are, but art helps us to take responsibility for our own seeing. It is not only the quality of the artwork that matters, but also the quality of attention that it enables.
The Arts of Revelation project is based at the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. It's a collaboration between scholars of various fields. So our team has a mix of theologians, philosophers, and psychologists.
The questions that this project is trying to answer is, how does engagement with art enable us to see in ways that might also be relevant for our religious engagement with the world? In other words, we're starting with the assumption that to encounter art is not only to encounter the work of particular geniuses. To encounter art is also to learn to see in a particular way.
This project has been a mix of theoretical and empirical studies. So we have thought in general or theoretical terms about how we think art might be a context that could be compared to other contexts that influence how people think. But then we've also tried to devise small studies, building blocks, which look at particular kinds of art or particular ways people might encounter art.
The whole project is dedicated to this concept of revelation, and revelation is not a psychological concept. So what we do, we try to translate it into the language of empirical psychology. Basically, we try to understand how people make sense of art and how that making sense of art then changes how people interpret and make sense of reality.
When we think of revelation in the project, we don't necessarily mean a divine revelation or the transmission of a particular content. So what we mean by revelation is more a form of new understanding. So revelation as the coming to an insight or a change of perception or mind that enables a deeper engagement with both art and the world and also with divine things.
When people are in art context, when they engage with art, it changes how they interpret what they encounter, but it also changes how they later interpret reality.
To be human is just to be artistic. And humans are meaning-making things. We expect, we look for, we hope for meaning in the world. And we want to be part of that meaning.
When something like a play really touches us, it's because it reaches inside of us in some way, and it articulates, it makes real out there something that we might not even feel we were able to put into words or grasp in any way ourselves. And it's not only us anymore, it's also a connection, a relationship that we suddenly have to somebody or something outside of us. And I think that that can happen in a church service as well. I think that particularly in the beautiful language of the liturgy, of the biblical readings, of the music, there can be a sense that somebody reaches inside of us, and things that keep us awake at night or wake us up in the morning or that we don't understand about ourselves are given language and expression. I think a lot of people relate religious faith to a mental illness, or putting it less strongly, a defense mechanism, right? It's either a way of misconstruing the world as having more intention or meaning than it actually has in order to secure ourselves against the chaos of the world, or to close the world down in some other way so that it's not as big and as scary and as chaotic as it actually is. We think that the opposite should be the case for religion, that religion ought to give us the confidence to meet the world in all the chaos and darkness and messiness and incomprehensibility in which we actually encounter it, because we have within ourselves the resources, ultimately the trust and the hope that somehow all of this is carried, and therefore all of this can be encountered and engaged with. And I think that the best art is also instilling that kind of trust or confidence, because the best kind of art doesn't, like kitsch, shut out all the dark parts of the world and paint a world that is brighter and easier than the outside world is. The best art takes all that is dark and terrible and metabolizes it in some way. And so again, I think that in the encounter with art, we can learn resources for encountering our world.
There's a fundamental openness to art, and in fact, that's part of why art licenses us to think more broadly, or to look for significance or meaning, or to see the world in a new light, even as we come away from that artwork.
A work of art that's moved me is Alphonse Mucha. He did a series of drawings based on the Lord's Prayer, the Pater Noster, and they're not very well known. I think they're too weird for religious people and too religious for secular people, but they're really special, they're really odd.
Artworks that move me are portable altarpieces from the 1500s and 1600s. They feature a Japanese-style lacquer frame and European-style sacred images of Christ. Diverse materials coming together into one whole object, creating this new space in which one can encounter the divine.
I love talking about The Night Watch by Rembrandt. You ever seen it? Yeah. It's probably the painting, to me, that has the absolute biggest presence of any painting ever. That painting, it makes you hear things. You can smell the dust, you can smell the metal and the leather. You could kind of hear the people sort of talking and mumbling to each other.
I spent a good few hours with this piece called Motherhood. This was a woman who was literally and figuratively supporting herself so that she could support her children. She was lifting them up so that they could see farther.
To have religious faith is to approach the world the way that people approach art. Because religious believers take themselves to be addressed by God, by the world as a work of God, they also have the courage to take part in its creation. They trust that in God, all things hold together and can therefore be investigated with courage and tenacity. That humans and all created things have dignity and can therefore be approached with empathy and humility. And that creation is not yet finished and can therefore be engaged with openness and creativity.